You, my friends, are just in time to Take a Shift, a revolutionary podcast hosted weekly by yours truly, Belinda and Catherine, that will literally alter the trajectory of your life.
We're on a mission to listen, ignite, and transform, challenging ourselves and you, dear listener, to journey deeper and get uncomfortable. Discover what lies beyond those layers of fear, judgment, smallness, and everything else that's been getting in your way up until now. Choose to step into new possibilities and courageously wake up to the life you know you were meant to be living.
So buckle up, Buttercup, summon your curiosity, and together, let's take a shift. Hello, dear listeners. It's Take a Shift time, and I'm Catherine. I'm here with my beloved soul sister, Belinda.
Hi.
And today's podcast, we've talked about this quite a bit for many, many years, but today's podcast is going to be about the choice to keep choosing. And I love this aspect because there's so much freedom in that aspect of choice, right? Like we have the freedom to choose exactly what we choose to choose. And we have, in this world, we have so much to choose from in our day-to-day being, whether it's activities or food or whatever, experiences, people, whatever it is that we want to choose to have in our life. And so Belinda and I wanted to explore the choice to keep choosing in a couple of different aspects, I think, right, Belinda? And that kind of, who knows where this will go, as all of our conversations. But I absolutely love this title, so I can't wait to take a deeper dive into the choice to keep choosing. Tell me more, Belinda.
Well, I think we start with this idea even of choice. Like, particularly if I think about working with clients and in my own personal relationships, navigating conflict and challenges, oftentimes I think we start from this place of like, I don't have a choice. It's like, and that is a mindset, right? It's like a mindset and a framework of like, I don't know, if you're married, you don't have a choice to really do something differently in your relationship, or I don't have a choice to go to work every single day, or I don't have a choice, you know, about picking up my kids from school, or I don't know, it could be really anything. And just this idea of like sort of getting underneath, you know, where does choice come from? Like, where does our choice come from, right? So there's the choices we have out there, which is sort of the selection of life. And we're each selecting certain things, like a Chinese food menu, right? There's column A, there's column B, there's column C, and each of us are doing this. But as I like to often say, there's the content and then there's the context. And the context here is, how does one even feel about one's ability to choose? Like, are we consciously choosing, or do we just accept? And then we, you know, we have choices and we go back and say, well, because isn't that when we often say, I don't have a choice? It's when we look back on our life and said, oh, life didn't turn out for us the way we wanted it to. Didn't have a choice. I don't have a choice. Right?
Right. Well, and will you start by like giving me some clarity on when I hear you say this a lot, and I'm grateful for the clarity. Tell me more about context and content. Will you define those for me first?
So if we look at it like from just a perspective of our life in general, I like to say that the content of our life, it's like the ingredients in a salad. Like the lettuce is maybe the work we do in the world, and the tomatoes are our family, and the cucumbers are our relationships, and the celery is our social life, and etc. And we have all these ingredients, all these aspects of our life that we're living. the bowl for the salad is the context. So it's really, who are we being as we're living this? What's our worldview as we're living this? What are our belief systems? How do we even come to our belief systems? Are we aware that we have belief systems, and do we know where they came from? Are we consciously engaging with them, etc.? And if you think about it, if you're making a salad and you've got a bowl, like the bowl is containing all of that. And it actually shapes what you can do with it. You can mix it up, you can spread it around, right? If you took away the bowl and you had all of your ingredients on the table without the bowl, what would happen? Pieces would fall on the floor, like it'd be a big mess. You couldn't mix it up. It'd be like, it just would be silly. So I think that's the way that seems, to communicate most easily. So it's really it's the same way as if you're thinking, well, I'm watching a play and I see the actors in front of me, but there's all these things that are happening behind the scenes that we're not aware of. There's the person with the curtains, and then there's the light person, and there's the sound person, and then there's the backdrop, and then it's all moving, and it's all these people around to make that scene on the stage happen. And it's kind of like looking at our lives like that, like what's happening behind the scenes, because most of the time we're just looking at what's on stage and we're not thinking about all of that. And yet all the stuff happening behind the scenes is actually what's making happen on the stage happen to a great degree. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect sense. I love it. Yes, when you say it like that, perfect. It's just absolutely perfect. And I love how you said, in the sense of the belief systems that are running us. What I heard, of course, in my context was, are we even awake to the belief systems that we're operating under, right? Like that, because that creates choices for us, that consciously or subconsciously, that creates our choices and how we choose, right? Sure. And people choose all the time, and knowing they're miserable in the choosing, right? Like people all the time choose and no, this just feels like a trap. This just feels like, I've done it so many times in my life where I'm like, yes, I'm gonna, and I'm not talking about going to work. Sometimes going to work, if you're in the wrong job, that's going to constantly feel bad. Some days I don't want to go to work and I love my job, but I choose to go to work, and then usually I feel better for having gone, because I did what I said I was going to do, right? I'm going to show up and do this job to the best of my ability and be the best that I can while I'm in it. So, but I think a lot of times, and that really rings so true for me, because I was making off a belief system that I hadn't questioned yet, that I was doled out and given as a child, and I accepted as my own blindly without my questioning it. And then I was miserable, right? I was miserable. I would choose to go to church Sunday night, Wednesday. I was miserable. I was so miserable until I was like, wait, what am I doing? Who is God? What is heaven? What is hell? And what do I believe in? When you really stop and wake up and ask that question, then your choices become so much more colorful, right? They become so much more meaningful. And then you get to add through that choice of waking up, and I don't know why I'm getting onto this, but it just oh God, it just hit me so hard when you talked about a belief system that we keep choosing under, but we don't even know why we believe it, or we don't believe it and it's false, and yet we keep choosing it.
And most people will probably say that they didn't even feel like that was a choice. We're doing certain behaviors or routines or actions and activities in our daily lives, but many people, I think, wouldn't say it feels like a choice, because they're just sort of like second nature. And so part of this, choosing to choose, is starting to shift a little bit in the way we see our ownership of our own life experience, which it doesn't mean that we didn't get certain ideas and belief systems from people and places, institutions, society, that didn't serve us or did serve us or we don't agree with. All of that happened. the question now is, how are we willing to be with ourselves and challenge ourselves to choose it? So if we grew up with a belief system, or we grew up with certain practices in our household that we're doing today, to just even stop for a moment and say, is this a choice I make today? Because I have the choice to choose something different. And if I choose the same thing, that's fine. Just know that I'm choosing it now. Like, I think this brings back the pause again, that we just love to use that word. Like, so much lately I've been experiencing in my life is about slowing things down just a little bit, in becoming more aware of everything that I'm thinking and feeling, and choosing just slightly more aware, which is, it requires the pause. It requires an ability to be minutely self-reflective in how I walk through my life. And I think it is certainly a practice, and it's one that I don't think it really has to do with us being in a fast-paced environment or being all about technology, or I think it's just not a learned practice. Or maybe become like, in the industrial age did have some influence on that. I guess because it just makes me think that when I've spent time in Europe, and you didn't have maybe TV, and you didn't have the internet, or you didn't have the phones, or I feel like there is a bit of a slower pace, which allows a little bit more for this self-reflection and curiosity, which I somehow, right in this moment, feels very much tied to the ability to choose, and the practice of choosing the same thing over and over again.
Well, I love the pause. Well, and I think the pause should be its own podcast because it's so powerful. And it's like you just said, it's a practice. And when you said it's a practice, I put in the word in my own, in trying to feel it and bring it into me. It was a prayerful practice before you react or choose, right? Like, if you just, I've been with you in struggles, and I know how you're not a reactionary person. You do you go silent before you say anything, and then that's your pause. That's your downtime before you respond, react, and how you choose to be in that situation, right? And I really want more of that in my life, to really, and I've done a lot. And it is, that pause is powerful because it does give you a moment, whether in prayer or contemplation, to choose. And also, I think that pause, in the sense, before you, let's bring it into the context of today's podcast about choosing, like, for me, choices that were the best for me, I had an emotionality around, like joy, happiness, eagerness, my heart raced, right? Like, I was so excited. Like, when I made those choices, when I said yes to something or someone, I was so excited. And in the same sense, those choices that I didn't, like, I knew I wasn't supposed to be saying yes to or choosing, right? They had their own emotionality, anger. My heart was racing because I was mad, or I was angry, or I felt like I was boxed in, that I had to say, before I created boundaries for myself, I felt like I had to do certain things, right? Until I did some work, and I created my boundaries, and I knew it was okay to say no, even though it's going to make you feel bad, but I got to be true to me, right? But I still had reactions to both of them, the eager yes, the eager no, or where I wasn't supposed to be choosing for the best of my life at the moment. And so I think we have to, like, really, in that pause, in that choice, take a look at our emotions around it, right? Because Ron at USM would always say, follow your emotions and you'll get to where you need to be for I forget how he would say that, but he would always say, follow the emotions inward. Like, what are you feeling? You know, is your heart racing? Is it because you're happy, or is it because you're mad? What is this? And then, you know, the tattoo on my right foot, to thine own self be true. You know, and I always laugh and say I need a tattoo on my left foot that goes first, know thyself. Like, that comes before to thine own self be true, because you can be true to yourself and be down a rabbit hole you shouldn't be for the best of your being, right? Like, because we keep choosing, like, and I'm going to go back to that belief system that I'm choosing, and I'm so asleep because I don't even know what I believe in, you know, like something higher than me, or belief in myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I never, because I can remember so clearly in my early 30s saying and being in this belief system that was not mine.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing worse.
And I think that highlights the idea that we're all on a journey, and part of that journey is discovering, right, what is my truth. And I think that the idea around choice has a lot to do with simply owning that journey. Like, we could be anywhere on a timeline on that journey. For me, I think I just love this idea around choice, because we could be in the moment choosing something that doesn't feel correct for us. But if we can own that choice, then we can learn from it. Then we can grow from it. Then we can make a different choice. What often happens, however, is we're not true to ourselves because we don't know yet what that truth is, because we haven't maybe tapped into it yet. We make a choice, and then we make up a story after about how we were victims of that choice or that situation or whatever. So when someone says, well, you had a choice, people want to say, F you, I didn't have a choice, right? I was in that situation. And they certainly don't want to say, I didn't know my truth yet, so I made the best choice possible, and now I know. That's a very different approach to just this idea of choice. So, you know, I mean, we've talked a little bit on this podcast, but certainly in other work we've done together, personally and professionally, around our bodies and our health and food and our relationships with our family and all of this. And I know for me personally, I could tell really a series of victim stories about my journey with my body in this lifetime. And I don't think anyone would argue whether or not those were true, like those narratives and those stories and those experiences of pain and disappointment and hurt and rejection. It's not about them being true or not. It's simply, as I look at the role I played along the way, there was certainly a long time where it was sort of like I didn't have a choice. I was just reacting to people, places, situations around me, and did what I did to survive, let's say. And that is one way of telling the story. Another way of telling the story is I was making choices, and if I look back and say, oh, I made this choice and that was the best choice I could make in that moment, and then this one and this one, and made the best choice I could make in this moment, there's an ownership of my story there versus a lifetime of being a victim and saying I didn't have a choice, which for me just feels uninspiring, and I'll often say uninteresting for me. I like that word. It's like so boring. It's so boring. Like, that story is boring, and it causes me great suffering.
Yes. Like when you're talking, I'm just like, my best friend on the planet, who's known me since I was in my 20s, and she's been with me through a husband, she's been with me through partners, dating, the whole thing. And we always laugh, and we're like, I could never be a judge because she knows everything about me, right? So we always laugh about that. But like, she and I had a conversation one time, and we'll talk about an ex-partner, and I was like, and I laugh because I'm like, I guess you see how wounded I was when I chose that partner, right? Because you look back and you're like mortified. You're like, who the fuck was I to choose? Like, I fully chose that person. Who the fuck? How wounded was I? You know, when you look back and you're like, I fully chose that. What? Oh my God, poor me. Where was I at? What was I thinking that I chose this person to be with for a year or 2 years or 5 years, whatever. And so, you know, I always laugh and say I used to be a good 3 to 5 year person to be with someone, because that was about the extent of my ability to be interested. Like, it, a lot of times it came on very, I mean, it could be the first, you know, time that you dated. Like, I remember dating, I would be like, well, what are your 5 and 10 year goals? And they'd be like, what? You know, or what are your greatest strengths? What are your greatest weaknesses? And they're like, is this an interview? And I'm like, hell yes, an interview. You're not getting this hour of our life back. Hell yeah, it's an interview. I'm going to see if we're going to go on a second date. You know, just crazy stuff like that. But like, that's in like when you grow up in your choosing, right? Like, you really, like, you come into yourself in your choices. Because I can look back over the landscape of my partnership and my dating life and that aspect, and there's just nothing but a lot of red flags. And what the fuck was I thinking, right? Like, and I fully chose it. Like, nobody put a gun to my head and made me choose this person to say yes to.
Well, and we have to remember that when I think back to my first husband in my 20s, I was a really different person. And at the time, I mean, I got a lot of feedback from family and friends about those choices and the choice to get married so soon and in the circumstances under which I was getting married at the time. And I remember thinking very as clear as I could possibly think at that time in my head and my heart, as far into the future as I could possibly see at that moment in time, that was a perfect choice for me. And anytime I think back to that example in my life, that relationship, and for years, even today, there is some unresolved material there for me. I know I don't feel 100%, I'm probably at 95% complete. That 5% where I don't feel complete, it can either be the victim story, some things that I'm holding over from that relationship, which again brings back this idea like I didn't have choice in that relationship. There were, you know, for the remaining issues that I'm thinking about, or I don't have choice in how I see that situation now. Or I can say I have about 5% of incomplete material from that relationship, and my job is to figure out how to bring that to completion. And so in that respect, everything that I've ever experienced, if it feels still today like an unresolved issue, and by saying I own every decision I've made, I've owned every choice, I've owned every, you know, experience, gives me then, there's a lot of compassion there. Like, I didn't do it wrong. I didn't do it bad. I didn't make mistakes. I made choices. And there's an ability to bring resolution to past experiences, to my younger self, so that my present day self and my future self, as you like to say, can expand as opposed to being contraction mode. And when we're judging our choices or judging others for situations, I feel that's contracting, and it doesn't really allow us to learn and grow and really, as they say, learn from our mistakes, quote unquote. Right.
And I'll help you with that 5%, because it's just what you said, Belinda, in the sense that, you know, I laugh about it and I go, God, how wounded was I when I chose this person? But that's really a judgment, right? Like, how wounded was I when I chose me in this relationship, right? But, you know, I really wouldn't trade a thing, because every relation, because if you said to me right now, okay, well, you can take a relationship A, B, C, and you can trade those in, but we can't guarantee you'll be who you are in this moment, in this time. And I would be like, not no, but hell no. Because everything is perfect, right? Like every aspect of me being asleep and making those choices was mirroring something back to me to wake up, grow up, seek, whatever that was. And I wouldn't change a thing about it. I laugh about it now and go, oh my God, how wounded was I when I made that choice? I just wasn't awake, and I was using every tool that I was awake to, right? Like there's a lot of tools that I've been asleep to. There's a lot of tools I choose to sleep to when I want to make a choice that feels better, right? Like, oh, I'm going to do this. Come hell or high water, if it hair lips Jesus in Georgia, I'm going to do this. And I remember sitting at a dinner table in Dallas with you like a year, 2 years ago, whatever. And I said, you go, I don't think this is the best for you. And I turned around to you, remember this conversation? And I turned around and I said, Belinda, I am going to have this experience. It may turn out shitty, but I am going to have this experience and I'm going to explore this and I'm going to see what happens. Right. And and of course it wasn't the right one and the right aspect and right experience. But by God, I investigated it out. And that's just the way I did it. And
let me interrupt you there, if I may. It was a perfect experience because you chose it. Right. You didn't know what the outcome was. And that's where we have to also, like, in choosing, we need to start understanding that part of our lacking or limited view around choice is that attachment to the outcome. If you say, you said back then around that experience, I'm choosing this experience because I want to have this experience. You didn't know where it was going to end up, right? And I had a feeling in my mind where it was going to end up. And the way I was having that conversation with you was, if it ended up here, is this what you want? And you said yes. Like, it was okay. You just simply wanted to have that experience. It's only when we think, oh, it was supposed to turn out some other way that we look back and say, shouldn't have done it. Right? Do you remember that? Like, it was very clear.
I do. And the suffering, there's two phases of suffering and choice. When we make it in attachment to the outcome, and after we've made the choice and what we see is the outcome, and we can still suffer on it or choose not to. And choose to have it is the aspect of that, like in that choice, I was like, I'm going to have this experience, and I wasn't tied to the outcome. So it was just like a joyride, right? Like, I'm just going to see where this thing goes and where it lands.
And you did.
Right. And I did. And I didn't really, care where the outcome is, but sometimes I make choices and I really am like tied to the outcome, and that's suffering right in choice.
That's true.
And if we take that aspect, when I look back on it, I'm not suffering because, that turned out like you said, but I had the experience. I wasn't attached, and I'm not suffering with it. And I had fun choosing. Right. Mm-hmm. But sometimes we make choices and then we suffer in the choosing and we suffer when it's over, because of the choice we made, right? When we look back. And sometimes I think we just have to reframe that and allow ourselves the grace and the compassion, as you say, to say, I did the best I could with the tools I had. It was my choosing. It was all my choice. And it was for my growing. As long as, and I've grown from each one of my mistakes, right? I'll call them mistakes. But I don't even know if I could call them that, Belinda.
No, each one of your choices. You've grown from each one of your choices. And that, again, brings back to the context. If our context is a learning approach, right? A learning life lesson approach to life, then everything we experience has value. And we wouldn't get rid of anything because we valued everything. We may have a feeling like something was more joyful and something was more painful, and like those feelings, the way that we would attribute feelings to experiences may then suggest to us, well, I want more of that. I want more joy, less pain. But it doesn't make the pain any less valuable than the joy if we're saying life is about experiencing everything. And then it simply becomes a question of, where do I redirect or direct my attention to more in my life? Is it more towards pain or more towards joy? And I can be directed towards joy, intentionally, consciously directed towards joy, and there's going to be pain. But even how I see the pain can be in a context of receiving, a context of learning, a context of allowing, right? So this choice, I mean, for me, one thing I did want to bring into this podcast today was really talking about relationships, particularly because this is one of the things that I've been doing in my now 9-year relationship. I feel like on a regular basis, and I do it with clients, struggling to choose to stay in a relationship or to leave, is this question around what the value is in choosing the same thing over and over again. Even when it's hard, even when just that simple thing. And I'm not saying, I mean, for me, it's a daily practice about choosing to be married and choosing to be in a couple when sometimes I want to not be. Is that right?
You and everybody else in America, right? In the world. And I love this aspect. Like, we can say in a relationship with someone else and in a relationship with yourself, for choosing, right? Like I know we've had this in the context of relationships, in the sense of continuing to choose your partner that you're with, even when you don't want to, even when you want to make a different choice because it would serve you better, feel better, whatever that is, that you keep choosing. And I think there's a lot of power within the ability to keep choosing the same choice of partner or in relationship with yourself. Like one of the things I'm hot on right now is, we've talked about this, but in the choosing of what's good for me to eat or exercise on a day-to-day basis, right? Like I have to keep choosing to have this aspect in my day-to-day life. I have to keep choosing to have this entity, this essence, this person in my day-to-day life, and interact with them even when I get mad, or I don't want them there, or do I choose someone else, right? Like, did I make a wrong choice? Like, when you start questioning that, when you get mad or hurt or upset, or you're in suffering around this relationship, to person or with yourself, the power to keep choosing the same thing over and over again. And I think there has to be some aspect that I'd really like to hear you talk about too, in the aspect of the ability to keep choosing the same thing over and over again. But what is some of the I really want to talk about what is some of the criteria and the emotionality behind, how do we know that this is the best thing for me, even if I'm paying a high price for it right now? Like, in the sense that, right, like, and I'm talking about exercise and food, you're talking about relationship, but it is something we've got to keep choosing on, because Blair's the best for you, and you're the best for Blair. I know that exercise and food and Caroline is the best for me. So how do we keep, I want to talk about the emotionality, what comes forward in that, and how we know to keep choosing what we're choosing.
Well, I think that's really interesting, because if I bring emotion into it, some days I feel great in relationship and some days I feel shitty. And if I made a choice on any day because of how I felt, I would never be married. Because right? Because the shitty days would be like, on those days I want out, right?
Yes,
The
but
good
you
days.
still feel that. You
Well,
still feel shitty, right?
yes. So here's
choosing.
Yes. So that's what I'm saying. So, okay. So to make that clear, like using our emotions to make a decision is maybe not.
It's an indicator though.
It's an indicator. How I would look at it, how I use emotions for me. We were in a two-hour workshop just the other day, and one of the facilitators said, our emotions are basically directing us to a met need or an unmet need. And I thought, our feelings are about a need that's being met or not met. I never heard it that way before. So oftentimes I think what we do with our feelings is, I feel bad. Why do I feel bad? Oh, I'm in an unhappy marriage. Oh, therefore, it must be that my husband is making me feel bad. I'm not happy, therefore I should leave. Right? Versus, I'm feeling badly. I'm unhappy. Getting connected to what that represents, getting connected to what the unmet need is. Now the question is, am I going to get this for my husband? Do I make requests? Do I get specific? Or do I make that request with someone else? And then that inquiry can then lend itself to an inquiry about, is this the correct marriage for me to be in? But there's like a process to deconstruct there, and simply having the emotion or having the feeling, even if you've had it 1,000 times, if we haven't processed it, if we haven't been able to pause and understand where that comes from, then making a decision, really, we're not going to feel consciously that we're able to consciously choose in that moment. And I think this is, I don't know. I think I've been doing this work a long enough time to see people coming in time and time again, basically saying, I've been feeling so badly for so long, I got to get out of the marriage because it must be about the marriage. And the people who are willing to sit and pause and consider choosing out of the marriage may be the correct answer for them. But there's a lot more that goes into that choice than simply, I feel bad, it must be about my husband, my spouse, my partner, therefore I'm out. So when you're asking about, how does this work? To me, this idea of choosing the same thing over and over again, just even owning that concept of way of walking through life is a choice. Meaning, what you said before, Blair's perfect for me, I'm perfect for him. I don't believe that we are any more or less perfect for each other than any couple out there. What I believe is that when I chose to continue to be in that relationship, even when I stepped out for a while, even when it didn't look good, even when the choice that I kept coming back to time and time was the idea that if I chose him over and over and over again, there would be things revealed. I would learn and grow. Unconditional love would be possible. So again, we're talking about context versus content. So many of us are looking for that perfect person, that perfect relationship, that perfect plan, that perfect health plan, right? That's the content. I believe that maybe we can't be with anybody on the planet, but this idea of soulmates, or there's only 10 people on the planet, or I think we can choose to be in relationship with anyone. The degree to which we'll be in relationship with that person is a question, right? And a choice. I think the bigger, more exciting question is what happens when we simply choose over and over again? What could happen? And that is part of the context, right? Not looking at the person like Blair's personal attributes, what he likes, doesn't like, what he does well, doesn't. When I look at that, the contents of our relationship, right? There are things I love and there are things I don't love. There are things I enjoy and things I enjoy less. There are things that make me happy and there are things that make me frustrated. When I go back to the context of our relationship, there's the spaciousness, right? We love that word. There's a spaciousness that happens that says, I'm witnessing, I'm experiencing, I'm being curious, and I'm choosing over and over again, because in choosing over and over again, I have an idea that I've decided that I'm going to get to what I believe is a goal in relationship, which is unconditional loving. And that means that's the context. So I think the reason why a lot of people are struggling is because they don't have a context, whether it's their relationship to their body, their relationship to the work they do in the world, their relationship to another person. We don't have a context of, why am I in relationship to begin with? Why do I have a body to begin with? What do I think I'm supposed to be experiencing here? And that's for each of us to decide. And once we decide, keep choosing that over and over and over again. Right. It's almost like, I think what I have seen so many times in couples, I think it's just a great example, is people leave when it gets hard. When it just feels too hard, people leave. And again, I'm not saying that there aren't certain relationships that are clearly complete. And I have seen a number of people over the years who choose to move through that discomfort, the hardest part in their relationship. And when they do, on the other side, there is something more magnificent than they could have ever imagined. But part of that, being able to step into that new possibility, was to be able to stay the course and move through those most difficult moments of their relationship. Choice.
Well, and as we know, like in Loyalty to Your Soul, and the base of USM was, if there's anything external upsetting you, it's not what's going on. You know, if you want to go, I'm upset because, and the answer is anything external, right? I'm upset because the weather is not sunny. I'm upset because he said, did this, she did this, or didn't do the laundry as they said they would. If there's anything that is troubling you, bringing emotional upset to you, and it's an external answer, like I'm upset because, and it's an external answer, that's not the truest answer for where you're at, right? Like, because at that moment, I mean, it's an indicator, but really you have to really come into yourself and go, what is this person trying to reflect to me? Why am I upset? Just because they didn't do the laundry? What's really underneath this? What's going on within me, right? Like, that's the aspect.
And that's the choice. Here's the context. I can choose to live my life with, I'm upset because, and I can choose to live my life where I get upset, I'm asking questions about my resistance, my reaction to that, right? And I'm choosing to own my personal experience no matter what's happening. Choice, but it's a choice there.
Okay, right. Like, that's gold, right? Like that, there's the ultimate choice, right? Because if you keep choosing to find the external answer to it, I'm upset because they did this, it out there did something, caused my upset, my job is not what I want it to be, whatever that is, that's a choice to live that way. And you will always be an upset. You will always be almost miserable, right? Because you'll keep choosing the externalness of not owning your shit, right? So I love how you, like, there's the ultimate choice.
And it's okay either way. I mean, I think we have to be really mindful that you're having your experience and I'm having mine. And I know as a mediator and doing the work that I do, I have to be super mindful at not judging other people's choices. Even when I see them suffering and think, oh gosh, it could be so much easier for you. We don't know why people are experiencing what they're experiencing, why some people choose mindfulness and other people choose not mindfulness, or some people choose suffering, you know, especially because those people that we may say are choosing suffering do not experience choice. When somebody is suffering, I know for me, when I've suffered in my life, if somebody said it's a choice, I'd be like, fuck you, it's not a choice. I'm suffering, leave me alone. Have some compassion, you know? So
some people have suffering as a story and a choice.
Yeah.
I mean, right?
So I think this idea of, you know, choosing, the choice to keep choosing I think as we bring this to a close today, how anyone would even listen to this whole podcast of ours is a choice. Like, I would ask people to consider, anyone who's listening, how you're feeling right now about this conversation. Is it opening it up and expansive for you? Are you starting to feel like there are situations in your life where you feel maybe you haven't looked at it from I'm at choice here, you've looked at it from a different way and now you're reconsidering? Is this a contracting conversation? Like, how are you feeling? And then being able to sit with a question of, do I feel like I can be at choice in even how I'm experiencing this? And if the answer is no, well, then there's more exploration to do potentially. And if the answer is yes, well, then great, right? You're already experiencing in your life what's possible when you start reframing a bit and looking at what you're experiencing from this context.
Or just the question of opening and understanding you have choices. Like, you can choose to feel like this for the rest of your life, and that's okay. Or you can choose to not. And that requires some investigation within. Right?
Well said. Yeah.
I love this idea because there's so much food for thought in this, and the thing that really comes out for me is compassion and choices. Ours and theirs. And when people make choices around us, we can either find that compassion and find that compassion, and if we don't agree with it, then we draw our boundaries and find love for them, or we support them in that choice, and we all move on, right? Together, sometimes not together, and it's all okay. Right? There's still a lot more under here, but we'll get that for another day.
Yes, to be continued.
To be continued. We choose to keep choosing.
That's right. Choose to keep choosing.
Right? And we'll continue to keep choosing, and we'll continue doing a podcast about something fun and new next week. But in the meantime, if you want to find us in any way, you can find us at www.takeashiftnow.com. You can find us on YouTube under Take a Shift, and you can find us on Instagram, Take a Shift, Facebook, Take a Shift, Twitter, Take a Shift. So there's lots of ways to find us. And until next time, we love you, dear listeners, and go find your shift.
Love you.
Love you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Take a Shift, a part of Mental Health News Radio Network. We are so grateful for your time and presence. Always remember, you're just one shift away from a better feeling day in your life. Until next time, remember to listen, ignite, and transform. Much love from us to you.